What's going on, everybody, and welcome to your 16th AngularJS tutorial, in which we'll be learning something about HTTP service in AngularJS. Now, HTTP service is nothing but a fancy way of saying that to retrieve data from servers and remote servers, you can say. So it's kind of like the XML HTTP object we have done in JavaScript. So let's get started with it, and as I write the code, I'll explain what I'm doing. So first of all, let us create a controller, and this application should be about let's say some people living in the town, their names and their, you can say, age. So let's create people as the controller name, and in the controller.js let's grab this data first. Let's say angular.module, and this should be main app, and since we don't have any dependencies for now, so let's just leave that array as blank, and the controller right here is people. So we need to create an anonymous function right here, and to pass the scope, obviously. Now here you need to pass the HTTP object as well, since this is a core service of AngularJS by now, by the version of 1.3.14. Therefore we don't need any dependency for this HTTP object. This would work just fine by including the AngularJS main file itself. So we are good to go. So now in the this function right here, we have access to both scope and HTTP services. So let's get started now, and before actually getting started, we need something as raw data. So let's create a new file here, and in here let's write some raw data for our application. So let's create a JSON out of this, and let's create database.json. Alright, and now let's add something like records, and inside this I'll just do name is male, age 18, then the next record name J, age 18, then the next one, any of these records would go, it's up to you. Name Alex, age 27, and the final one would be name anonymous, age. So our record, the last one, looks kind of fancy, but this is just an example of dummy records here. So let's now just increment it with a tab. So let's now just return out to our code. Let's use the HTTP service to retrieve this data and to display it nicely in our document. So to do that, first of all, let's create some container kind of thing to actually work with. So I'll just create a list here, and I'll just say with the h2 names and age of programmers in the local area. And now what I'll do is I'll make use of the ngRepeat directive, which we learned long back in, I don't know, maybe it's second or third tutorial, but you can always look back into that. So what I'll do is I'll do li ng repeat. Now this would repeat li as many times as the condition inside this is true. So I'll write the condition later on. So now let's write a condition itself right now so that it's easier to work with later. So to start with, in ng repeat, I like to give it a temporary name of the data we are grabbing from Angular scope. So let's write for person in persons, and I know both of these are not defined right now, but we'll be doing this and would be defining this inside the controller just in a minute. And when this happens, then I want person dot, and the database says name and a colon should be good, and then I want person dot age, if I spell it right. Yes. So our ng repeat is ready to work with, and now let's hook up the controller finally. So let's get to HTTP now, and how do we work with that? So to do that, first of all, write http dot get. Now this get would initiate a get request with anything we supply inside the parenthesis, the URL here. So there would be a get request to that, and since right now we are working on localhost, so I'll just do a localhost URL, and this is AngularJS, I guess, and the file is database.json. So let me just confirm this once in the browser if this actually works. Yeah, so you see guys, this is working. So we have got our file ready. So now the next thing I need to do is this HTTP get, when gets successful, I need to add a method to it which is .success, and this method is fired whenever there's a 200 OK response or some kind of data is retrieved, or basically, you know, when this request gets completed. So on success, I want something as response, obviously, in the anonymous call. So in the response, what I need to do is, now this one is a tricky part, I want this persons to be filled by the scope, since this was undefined right now, and we do not need to define the person because this is just a temporary variable iterating over persons again and again. So the main purpose of this code is to define somehow persons. Now what I'll do is I'll pass on the scope dot persons equals response dot whatever the response parent is, which is records this time. So now what's happening here is that first of all we are initiating a GET request with Angular's HTTP service, and then on the success of that request we are getting a response from the server, and we are just injecting the scope dot persons with this response dot records, and this records should match this word right here. Alright, so now let's see the things, whether they are working or not. Here's the browser window, and let's reload this. Alright, so now you see that we have got a nice pretty list of all the users, names and the age of the programmers in the local area. So you see that if I check out the console and reload it once more, in the network area we see that there's a GET request to database.json, and in the headers, request headers, you can check out that it has been made by AngularJS page. The refer is this one. So this GET request by the HTTP module is listed here inside the network area. So if you reload this, you'll see that this data loads a little later because there's some time took by Angular to actually initiate a GET request and get the response data and fill all of that stuff. So you see, this is a kind of very simple application which is repeating itself again and again. So I could actually create a search bar here as well, search box here as well, which would kinda give me an option to filter out the listings on the basis of names and age respectively, or whatever I like. It's kinda creating a kind of dynamic filter. So we'll be looking upon this in a couple of tutorials, but for this tutorial that's it for now, and I'll see you then next time. Don't forget to subscribe, and thank you for watching.